I drove through the pitch-black streets in frustration after a heated argument with my wife, the streetlights casting patchy reflections on the windshield. And because I didn't want to go home, I decided to go to my brother Tom's house to crash for the night, even though he was away on a long business trip. Tom called to guide me on where to find the spare key under the heavy doormat at the back door, instructing me to sleep in the living room at the end of the hallway because the other rooms were all locked. So I parked by the curb, walked around to the backyard, lifted the heavy doormat to grab the key, opened the door, and stepped into the dark hallway, turned on the light, took a quick shower, dried myself off before lying down on the sofa in the living room and turning off all the lights. I lay staring at the ceiling in the darkness, my eyes fixed on the dark surface above. After a few minutes, my vision gradually adjusted, and I could make out the basic architectural lines of the room. The tall bookshelves against the walls became solid black rectangles, intersected by faint outlines of the shelves. On the other side of the room, the shadow of a table lamp reflected on the wall, forming a motionless, dim streak of light. The silence in Tom's house was a special kind of silence. It wasn't like ordinary quiet, but carried an uncomfortable heaviness, as if my steady breathing sounded too loud in this space. But then the silence was broken by a strange sound. The noise started from the ceiling, like fingernails lightly scratching along the wood from one end of the room to the other, lasting less than 2 seconds before disappearing. I lay perfectly still, the muscles in my neck tensing slightly. My rational mind tried to provide an explanation. This was an old house, built many decades ago, and its wooden structure had gone through countless cycles of expansion and contraction due to temperature and humidity. Creaking sounds, groaning, even sudden snapping noises were all normal physical characteristics of such a building. I had heard Tom complain about these things in previous meetings, so I took a deep breath and tried to relax my body, letting myself sink back into the exhaustion after a long day. However, about 30 seconds later, the sound returned. In the still darkness, a harsh, heavy noise suddenly erupted from the ceiling directly above my head. It wasn't scratching or groaning, but a dull thud, as if a heavy object had been dropped or slammed down onto the attic floor. The sound made me jump, my heart leaping out of my chest. Right after that, before I could collect myself, a new series of sounds began. Light thumping noises echoed along the hallway, running back and forth as though rushing through the deep darkness. The sounds resembled someone walking barefoot or in socks, short but very hurried steps. Each time they rang out, my heart pounded harder. All my self-reassurance about rats or an old house vanished. Whatever was moving up there had the rhythm of conscious footsteps. I could no longer lie still. A cold shiver, not from the outside but from deep within my spine, spread throughout my body. My trembling hand reached for the baseball bat in the corner. Those mysterious footsteps continued in the hallway, quick and decisive, as if someone had just run past and then stopped right outside the living room door. I immediately sat up, cold sweat breaking out at the back of my neck. I gripped the bat tightly, quietly opened the door, but the dark hallway showed no sign of anyone. I turned on the light, tried each of the neighboring doors in turn, and all of them were locked tight from the outside with no signs of forced entry. Trembling, I walked around to the backyard. The moon had risen high, its flickering light shining through the trees. And when I looked up, the window of the room next to mine was wide open, the curtains billowing in the wind. Suddenly, in that pitch-dark room, A large shadow appeared abruptly and darted past the window frame very quickly before vanishing into the darkness. Terrified, I spun around and ran back to the living room, tripping over the edge of the rug, fumbling to lock the door from the inside, then turning off all the lights and pressing my eye to the door crack while my heart thumped so hard it felt like it would burst. I grabbed my phone and called the police, trying to stay calm as I recounted the noises and the figure. Then urgently called Tom to inform him. But he said the earliest he could return was dawn because he was very far away. While waiting, the scratching on the ceiling resumed more rapidly, as if someone was moving hurriedly directly above my head. Then the scratching suddenly stopped, replaced by heavy thumping sounds coming from the adjacent room, as though a large object was being dragged across the wooden floor, then slammed hard against the wall, shaking the window frame of my room. Cold sweat poured out of me as I silently prayed for the police to arrive soon. Fortunately, after 10 minutes of calling, the police arrived. I recounted everything once more while they swept flashlights across the hallway and backyard. They tried the doors of the rooms, found them all locked tight, then decided to break into the room next to the one I had slept in because they suspected someone might be hiding there. When the door burst open, a musty smell mixed with the metallic tang of blood rushed out. The scene inside was truly horrifying. The bed sheets had been pulled down onto the floor in a crumpled mess, several dried bloodstains scattered near the window, furniture disarranged, and on the ceiling, the attic access hatch had been pried wide open. One officer climbed up to the attic, shining his flashlight everywhere, then called his colleague to follow. There, they discovered a shocking truth. There were clear signs of habitation up here, including a filthy sleeping bag, cigarette butts, used syringes, empty water bottles, open canned food, scraps of blood-stained cloth, and a few strands of hair caught on the wooden beams. They came back down and concluded that the intruder had probably sneaked in through the unlocked window and had been secretly living in the attic throughout Tom's long business trip, using that bedroom only as an entry and exit point because the room was always kept locked and rarely touched. But tonight, my appearance had panicked him, causing him to drop down into the room, climb out the window, and flee into the backyard just before the police arrived. They checked the backyard, found footprints in the damp soil leading to the fence before they disappeared, then collected samples and said they would report back to me when the investigation results came in. Early the next morning, Tom arrived home, his face pale as he looked at the crime scene, especially the pried open attic hatch. He nodded silently as the police recounted the events, admitting he had no idea because he had been away on a long trip and hadn't checked the attic. A few days later, the DNA results from the hair and blood matched a wanted drug addict who had been sought for robbery and assault a few months earlier. I returned home to my wife, trying to resume a normal life. But every night when I turned off the lights, I lay perfectly still, ears straining to listen. Although our house has no attic, I still hear faint scratching on the ceiling, slow footsteps stopping outside the bedroom door, the doorknob turning gently as if waiting for my reaction. I no longer dare to sleep deeply because every time I doze off, I jerk awake drenched in sweat, feeling as though someone is still up there, watching me in the darkness, waiting for the moment I let my guard down so they can come down again. Everything started on a night when my parents went on a business trip and left me home alone. The house was located in the suburbs, surrounded by woods and roads with very little traffic. My parents often went on short business trips, so I'd gradually gotten used to their absence, even enjoying the comfort of the large house. freely doing things that were normally not allowed. That day was just like any other. I ate a late dinner in the living room and played games until midnight. At that moment, I suddenly came up with a mischievous prank. It was to make prank calls to strangers. Without hesitation, I found a random number online and dialed it. The first call connected to a number in another city. A woman picked up. I spoke in a distorted voice and asked if her refrigerator was running. She irritably asked who I was. I hung up immediately. I made the second call to another number. A man answered. I pretended to be a pizza delivery guy and said he had ordered but not paid. He cursed furiously, which made me laugh, and I hung up right away. I made a few more calls, each time saying something nonsense, and then hanging up. While making those silly calls, I walked around the room and turned off all the lights, leaving only a small lamp on the coffee table. Outside the window, the wind howled in strong gusts, which made me feel even more excited and eager to continue the prank calls. However, the next call was unlike the previous ones. After a few rings, the other end picked up, but no greeting came through. Only a long silence that lasted long enough for me to realize the person was listening. I tried to raise my voice and asked, "Is anyone there?" A deep, hoarse, and slow male voice came through, each word pronounced clearly. "Hello, Harry." I fell silent. My heart pounded hard. He continued without any hesitation. "Are you feeling cold?" I didn't answer, just tried to swallow. The voice spoke again, as if whispering right in my ear. "Your house feels so empty. You're very lonely, aren't you?" I was utterly shocked. This was the phone number of someone I didn't know at all, and I hadn't introduced my name. So how did he know my name? Immediately, I hung up so I wouldn't have to hear that terrifying voice anymore, then ran upstairs to my room, not forgetting to lock the door tightly. When I thought the bizarre incident had ended, I suddenly heard rustling sounds outside the door. From downstairs, I heard a faint metallic clink against the back door lock. The sound wasn't loud, but enough to make me jump to my feet while my heart beat faster than usual. I approached the bedroom door, pressed my ear against the wooden panel, and realized the noise wasn't random because it repeated many times with a slow and steady rhythm. I kept my ear pressed against the wooden door while the sounds from downstairs continued, sometimes slow footsteps on the floor, sometimes loud collisions as if something had been knocked over in the living room or kitchen. Each sound echoed clearly up the empty staircase, making it impossible for me to pinpoint exactly where the person was, only knowing that he had gotten inside the house and was moving freely through the familiar spaces of my family. After a while, the footsteps stopped, then resumed from a position closer than before, accompanied by the sound of a downstairs bedroom door opening and furniture being rummaged through. I backed away a few steps from the door, trying to keep my breathing steady while my mind kept flashing images of the man with the deep, hoarse voice on the phone. I realized he wasn't in a hurry because the way he moved and wrecked things showed he had time and faced no resistance. When the footsteps began on the stairs, one step at a time, I knew he was coming up to the upper floor, and the distance between us was closing. I looked around the room for a hiding place, while my trembling hands opened my phone and prepared the emergency call function. The footsteps stopped right outside my door, and immediately after came loud, continuous knocking, no words spoken, only rapid pounding on the wooden door. I didn't respond, but backed away and quickly crawled under the bed, while the knocking turned into harder banging, accompanied by sounds like the wall being hit or hard objects striking the door. I dialed 911 and held the phone close to my mouth to speak as quietly as possible. I tremblingly reported the address, the current situation, and said someone was trying to break into my room while the operator told me to stay in position and not make any more noise. The bedroom door began to shake after repeated blows. I heard wood cracking along with the heavy sound of a body slamming against the door surface. I lay still under the bed, curling up to avoid being seen, eyes fixed on the gap in front of me and ears straining to catch every movement. The operator kept talking to me through the phone, telling me to keep the line open and confirming that help was on the way. After a much harder impact than before, the bedroom door burst open with a dry snap of breaking wood. And immediately, heavy footsteps thundered straight into my ears. He ransacked without hiding anything, yanking drawers so they slammed against the dresser, overturning chairs and tables until the floor shook, then ripping open the wardrobe doors as if he had lost patience, while I had to grip the phone tightly and try not to make any sound. Through the low gap close to the floor, I could only see dirty shoes moving back and forth right in front of me, sometimes pausing too long so I felt he was bending down to listen, sometimes suddenly changing direction so I couldn't predict what he would do next. When he suddenly crouched low and thrust his arms straight under the bed, everything inside me nearly went numb. That large, ice-cold hand brushed against my pant leg and then swiftly clamped tight around my ankle. I shuddered. A shrill scream burst from my throat. He dragged me out a short distance. My back and shirt scraped across the wooden floor. Then suddenly, the pulling stopped. His hand released. I lay there unable to breathe, my body rigid for a few brief seconds that felt like release. Before my heart could resume its normal rhythm, that same arm lunged forward again at greater speed, this time easily seizing both of my ankles as though catching small prey. "No, let me go!" I screamed and began thrashing wildly. My hands flailed and grabbed at the bed leg, scratching my nails raw. But he was too strong. This pull was far more powerful and decisive than before, a terrifying force that seemed intent on wrenching me from my last point of grip. I clenched my teeth, every muscle in my body tensed, struggling with all my strength. My legs kicked wildly into the air against his arm, but it accomplished nothing. At the moment of greatest despair, police sirens blared sharply right outside the window, followed immediately by loud shouts and the rapid thud of footsteps storming into the house. The grip vanished abruptly. I fell freely onto the hard floor, my head striking hard enough to leave me dazed. In the flashing lights that flared and then died away, I managed to catch a glimpse of that large, dark shadow leaping up and rushing toward my bedroom window, the only escape route leading straight out to the backyard. The window slammed open with a crash, accompanied by the jangling of glass, followed by the rough sound of his body hurtling out and crashing into the bushes below with a loud rustle. Sounds of shoving, shouting, and struggling erupted just outside the room. Another officer ran to my side, trying to calm me while I remained curled up, trembling uncontrollably. When I was finally led out of the chaotic room, my limbs still shaking and my mind not yet fully processing what had just happened, I sat silently on the front steps while police moved back and forth inside. The broken doors, disarranged furniture, and fresh cracks on the walls made the once familiar house feel completely alien. And the sense of safety that had always been tied to this place never returned. Afterward, the police conducted their investigation based on what I provided. The phone number I called that day was traced to a small convenience store in the nearby area that had been closed for over a year. They believed someone might have been using that abandoned line, but there were no cameras, no fingerprints, no clues whatsoever to identify the person who answered on the other end. The police offered a hypothesis. The person might belong to a criminal group with access to leaked databases. When I called, their system automatically displayed my name, age, and possibly even my home address. That was how he knew who I was. He just needed to look up a little more and come straight to me. But I don't entirely believe that hypothesis. The biggest question keeps drilling deeper into my mind. Was the person who answered the phone and the intruder who broke into my house the same single individual? If it was the same person, that would mean he was already very close to me the moment I hung up. He could have seen my house, or perhaps he was somewhere in the darkness nearby before deciding to rush over. What did he want from me? It wasn't theft, because he didn't take anything. It wasn't to truly harm me, because he had the opportunity. So what did he need from me? My fear? Or was it simply a game? The police have temporarily suspended the investigation due to lack of direct evidence. They said the case might fade into oblivion if no new developments arise. But for me, nothing has ended. Every night, I still stay awake, ears straining to catch the smallest sound outside the now barred windows. I stare into the darkness and wonder if he's out there, waiting for another call, or for some moment of carelessness on my part. I will update if there is any new information. I hope that one day I can find sleep again, because honestly, I haven't had a single peaceful second of rest in the past week.